All right, everyone. Welcome to the show today. I am your host, Billy Bateman, and this is Digital Conversations presented by Chat Funnels. Today, I am joined by Kristina Jaramillo, president of Personal ABM. She's also a well-known authority in the space of ABM, has articles published in several places, including Forbes, Marketing Profs, Salesforce.com, Sales and Marketing Management Magazine, CMO Magazine, and many others. Kristina, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Billy. I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's my favorite topic, so I will have fun with this.
It will be fun. It will be fun. So for those that don't know you or much about Personal ABM, tell us a little bit about yourself and Personal ABM.
Sure. Personal ABM has been around for over 10 years, and we've kind of evolved with account-based marketing. We take a very niched approach, hence the personal part. So typically people will say we're running an ABM or account-based program. We're running with like maybe 300, 500 accounts. We usually only have about 2 to 3 dozen accounts. And we're focused on accounts that are fitting the ICP to a T and have the greatest revenue growth opportunity. And we work with tech, SaaS firms, people with complex sales, longer sales cycles, 6 and 7 figure deals, and even companies in the logistics and 3PL space to either we focus on a couple of things: win, protect, or expand key accounts. And again, they're going to be the ones that have the greatest revenue growth potential and greatest expansion opportunity as well.
Awesome. So how'd you guys get into doing this with Personal ABM?
Yeah, well, we started just LinkedIn marketing originally with small businesses and consultants. And we saw that account-based marketing was coming about. It hadn't really been given that buzzword or that official title. And we noticed that it was working on LinkedIn, but it needed a special tweak to it. It needed an extra layer of relevance, that personal layer, not just relevant to the rank and individual, but to the actual person. So what matters most to them as a person, as opposed to a buying committee or an organization or even their department. So we kind of just adapt over, the 10 plus years that we've been in business. And we were early proponents of the challenger sale, which is something we continue to be. But we didn't really know we were taking that approach until we kind of found the book and realized, oh, this sounds just like us. And the book has helped us kind of refine and hone our skills, because we could have been told previously that maybe we're a little aggressive, but now we put some finesse into it and kind of tweaked it and see what works and what doesn't work. And we kind of tested it out on ourselves first and then rolled it out to clients and just have grown with it and gone from there.
Cool. So, we're going to talk about ABM and LinkedIn is like really what we're going to dig into today. So first, everyone's got their own definition of ABM, and I wanted to know, what is ABM to you, and what do you think people are getting wrong, and how does LinkedIn work its way into ABM?
Yeah, sure. You're right. I think ABM is kind of one of those words that if you ask like a dozen different people, sales, marketing, customer success, they're going to have like a dozen different definitions. But to me, it is a business strategy. So it involves sales, it involves leadership, marketing, account management, customer success teams, anyone that's customer facing, like bring them together, and that we have a strategy to bring those new accounts to revenue. And again, existing or expanding existing accounts to greater revenue. And to me, it is the revenue engine for the business. So it's basically like the core strategy. But I've seen that ABM has kind of become diluted because it's become account-based awareness, account-based advertising, or account-based lead gen. And that's I think it's just the fact that marketing has been so caught up in scaling things, and the approach that we take can be scalable. It's just, it doesn't sound it right away. I'd have to walk you through that at another point, but just, I think a lot of companies are also using ABM, like I said, like those account-based advertising, lead gen, and they're focusing on filling that pipeline versus the complete buyer's journey. Because ABM, I've seen statistics on it, that it has the most success at the middle and bottom of the funnel, but a lot of people are really only focusing on the top. And I think a lot of people at this point, ABM is pretty, for the more sophisticated companies that are using it, have, figured it out for the top of the funnel and figured out for people that are showing intent or engaged, and that they have down. But what about that 60%, sometimes 70%, depending on the stats you're getting, that accounts that are not in market, or they're stuck in status quo, or they're waiting for the sales and marketing team to deliver like that relevant business value to them? What about those accounts that have shown intent but then stopped engaging? I think there's a lot of different things that we have to be asking ourselves. How can we use ABM in different conversations? Like how can we protect at-risk accounts? How can we expand? What we've noticed and what we found is working is that personal relevant connection is needed. And it basically starts with profiles, but goes into the social content or any content you're pushing out or sending out, any messaging. And it has to be super targeted, specific to the decision maker and influencer. And, it has to frame the selling conversation that you want to have with them. Where do you want this to go? Not just the feature and benefits that everyone talks about. So I think LinkedIn is a perfect platform for that, because it provides revenue teams the opportunity to make direct relevant connections with those people that they want to build relationships with. And that's how you can get to that human buyer. And especially if you're trying to access people that aren't responding to your campaigns or were responding to you, but then kind of went silent. I think one of the biggest problems is that most social communication is kind of about similar to email and live conversations. And they're just kind of pushing out what they think might be relevant, and they're missing what's relevant to the individual they're talking to, because it's different from person to person or organization to organization. And personalization is different from having personal relevance. I think they're two different. I know they sound the same, but they're two different things.
Yeah. So let's break that down. What's the difference between just like personalization and then personal relevance?
Okay. To me, personalization is something that maybe sales and marketing might have down. So like you add in a little bit of information, about their role, like you've seen in, people in their role are having this kind of problem, or, you saw some information in what's in there happening in their industry, or even in their company, like they just got a huge round of funding, or they just saw a huge revenue increase, whatever it is. When you get personal, you actually look at what's important to the actual person you're talking to, the human that you're talking to. And one of the great things about LinkedIn is that people can give you a lot of information if you go look at their profile. You can see what's important to them. What are they talking about? Like, what are they sharing if they're sharing? What are they participating in? What are they commenting on? What are they even saying in their profile? So you can see what their personal job description is, or what their KPIs are, and then you can speak to that, as opposed to saying, all HR leaders have this problem, or all marketers have this problem. It's not necessarily what you're thinking.
Yeah. No, almost everyone, I think at this point, gets those emails. They're not emails, but LinkedIn messages. It's like, hey, I see you're the VP of operations. Well, I'm sure you're struggling with this problem. And I'm like, actually, I've never even thought that was a problem. Like half of them, I'm like, really? Like, okay, like, yeah, I could see it for somebody else, but that's not a problem for me. It's interesting that's, what personalization is to a lot of people. When I'm like, no, let's
copy and paste. No.
Yeah. I'm regretting accepting this invitation to connect and removing that connection right now.
Immediately. Yes. Yeah. So, I hear that all the time.
So let me ask you this on LinkedIn is like, from talking before the podcast, that's where you think there's the greatest opportunity to do this. Mm-hmm. So if I'm, a marketer or even a sales team, that's trying to really be account focused in how we're getting into accounts and closing them and growing them, where do I start with LinkedIn? Like, what should I be thinking about after I've got my ICP? I know who I sell to. What should I start thinking about next?
Well, who exactly within the account do you sell to? And it doesn't mean just like who's your champion. It means who's going to be the decision maker. So it might not be someone even in their department. I know people were, I've heard this term a lot, especially in the middle of, actually the beginning of the pandemic. Like a lot of people were having deals either, stop or be frozen because they were being brought to the CFO, which was then the CFO, because they were signing off on everything.
Oh, for sure.
And they not necessarily were, always in the decision before, but now of course they are, because everybody's watching their pennies. So you have to know that just because you're talking to what's important to let's say the actual champion that you normally talk to, is the same thing is not going to be the case for the person that's making that final decision, what's writing off to them. If their KPI is actual return on investment, then you need to speak to that. If their KPI is increased efficiency or whatever it is, you need to get relevant to that person as well. And they're all on the same committee, so they all have, you think they would all have the same goals, and they do to a certain extent, but for their individual success and their individual role success, it's going to be different. So that's what I think people need to take into consideration. And I think that also goes with like customer success teams. I've seen a lot of them having the same conversation as the sales team. And if you're talking to a customer, they already know why they chose you. They already know why they either like or don't like working with you. They don't need to hear that same sales conversation with someone that doesn't know you or is not as familiar with you. They need to know why they should continue working with you, what you've done with them, and not just that we did ABC. We need to know, like, they don't care really so much about activities. They care about how those, how you filled their gaps, how those gaps that you did fill, how they impacted parts of the organization and not just maybe that one department. You can say that you had an impact on operations or an impact on finance as well as that department, then it's a different conversation and a different story. And it's much easier to get that internal buying consensus.
Okay. I love it. So another thing we talked about was, you mentioned there's a huge decrease in the response rate to email, LinkedIn messages. How can sales teams adapt to that? Because, that's traditionally how people for the last little while have been getting a hold of you, is send you an email, send you a message on LinkedIn. Let's get a conversation started.
Yeah, I think I think I saw a stat that it was like a drop in responsiveness, like 44%. And then I think it was from LinkedIn that did this study, and they said it was because of COVID. And I really don't think that that's the only reason. Yeah. I think it's because a lot of sales and marketers kind of forget that it's all about connecting with people. So obviously face-to-face meetings weren't a thing. Luckily, they're coming back. But we were forced to build, relationships in digital platforms. Some of us were used to that. Some of us had already honed in on that, and we're doing really well. So it wasn't that big of a deal. But a lot of people were just kind of pushed into it, with no training, with no etiquette, with no, like, how do I do this? And I think they thought because it was a different platform, it had a different way of navigating. And it's really not, because traditional sales and marketing is all about leading with value and showing value. And that's the same thing when it comes to digital, and especially LinkedIn. We were trying to all recover from, a lot of companies had stalled quarters, stalled pipelines, or, deals that kind of just fell through the cracks. But a lot of buyers don't want to go back to the way that it was, or pre-COVID buyer-seller relationships. According to McKinsey, that's something that they found. And I don't blame them. I wouldn't either. But what they did find is that a lot of buyers want more digital relationships with, business leaders, whether that's sales or marketing or C-suite or whatever. They want digital relationships. But the caveat to that is that they want relationships with people that they can trust, with people that are going to provide them value. The opposite of what we were just talking about of, I accept a connection and then you're automatically inundating me with generic messaging, or here's my calendar link, or let's get on a call, let's do a demo. And I'm like, wait a second, just because I connected with you doesn't mean any of those are relevant to me. But I think a lot of sales and marketing people are kind of just pushing out old messaging and not shifting to where buyers are now, whether that's what their needs have changed, their priorities have changed. You have to make you have to build new business cases to match where they are now, because this is their new and probably continuing normal. And I think that it brings me back to a quote that I love from Tiffany Bova, who used to, I don't remember where she was when she said this quote, but now I know she's at Salesforce now. She once mentioned that how you sell and how you market matters, and your process, your sales and marketing process matters, but how prospects and customers feel when they engage with you matters more. And I think that is something that we're losing sight of, because, we're stopping having the attention or focus on interactions with individual prospects and customers, as opposed to just trying to hit them as much as we can with as much content, with as much messaging, whatever it is that we're doing. But in most cases, I think people forget that you get one chance to win somebody over. You get one chance to protect the account from going somewhere else, or just, not continue with you, or even to expand. So that one communication misfire, one wrong interaction, one spammy email, like even that message, that nurture message you were talking about, you were going to disconnect with that person right away. So that was that one bit, misfire. You're going to leave a bad taste in somebody's mouth, and it's going to lead to unresponsiveness, inaction, just crickets on the other end. So I think people need to know, or need to keep in mind, whether it's sales, marketing, or account management, customer success teams, that you need to speak to the person rather than at them. So not at their industry and volume, or to get to volume at accounts. So there's no relevance, but you have to actually speak to them where you're giving them value, to create that human bond. And I think that's the best way to get through to these decision makers and the influencers. When you talk about what's specific to them, what are their specific gaps and impacts, and how you can, uniquely fill them.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. So you talked a little bit about challenger sale. How can you apply those challenger concepts on LinkedIn when you engage with the leadership? Because they're all ultimately going to be your decision makers. That thumbs up, we're good to go. Thumbs down, the deal dies.
Dead in the water. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so if people aren't familiar with challenger sale, just do like a quick thing up over it. It's basically about tailoring for resonance, teaching for differentiation, taking control of the conversation. So when I mentioned earlier about sales and marketing, like speaking at accounts, they're speaking to maybe accounts that all look the same, as opposed to treating each individual company and each individual as a separate entity. And instead of speaking to them, so speaking to them as a person, we start to make connections, and, these send out nurture messages just with this templating. That's something that would be the exact opposite of what Challenger does. So that personal relevance that I've been, mentioning a lot is really, really needed to speak directly to people. And tailoring for relevance means you speak to what they want, what their needs are, what their challenges are, what their gaps are, and what their impacts are. So if you're getting right to the heart of it, you're going to get as relevant as you can, and much more relevant than probably your competitor. Reframing thoughts and ideas is another concept of Challenger. It's, trying to get people to think of something in a new way. And a great way to do this is on your profile, in the content you're sharing, or any kind of messaging that you're sending out. You need to tell stories with them so that people can see themselves in those stories. So not those blanketed stories. So if you know exactly who your ICP is, you're going to have a story for them. And obviously one story is not going to resonate with everyone, so you have to have several. But you want them to see themselves in the story as much as possible so that you can make that emotional connection. And then that's a way of entering the prospect's world and helping them create a buyer's vision, or create that whole vision, versus what sales and marketing really typically and traditionally likes to do is force them into their world, where you try to push out your own messaging and pull them through the funnel, as opposed to letting them kind of guide themselves through the funnel. So when you take a challenger approach on LinkedIn, you're not making claims. What you're doing is you're speaking in a way that the prospect kind of comes to their own conclusion and can see how you're different through the stories that you're telling, and not only show their personal gaps and impacts, but maybe even your competitors' gaps and impacts. So you can pinpoint what would be the issue if they went with a specific competitor. So if you prospect and nurture the right way, we can apply this kind of approach to live conversations. We can do it to social and email. We can kind of skip the why you conversation when you get into an actual sales one-on-one. You can fast forward and kind of begin to shape their buying vision prior to getting live interaction with them, and the role your solution plays. And then in our social prospecting guides and social guides that I talk about, we have chapters dedicated to this, just so that people can kind of see what I mean. And if people haven't read the Challenger Sale, I really think they should give it a try and add it to their must-read list. It'll make a little more sense.
I agree. The Challenger Sale, you got to read it. Also, another book that I think has a lot of the same principles you're talking about that I read a few months ago was Building the Story Brand. Goes right along with the Challenger Sale. They're very similar, just different aspects. The Challenger Sale is a little more sales focused. Story Brand's a little more marketing focused. I think you bringing them together, you have a chance to really have a great experience for your buyers.
Absolutely.
All right. So before, we've only got so much time. And one thing I wanted to hit with you is you recently spoke at the Demand Gen Summit. And thank you for doing that. But one of the things you talked about was, how you can use ABM and LinkedIn for accounts that are kind of like stuck in the status quo. They showed some progress and just kind of like stalled out. I'd love for you to hit on, what you can do there to help use those tools to get those accounts moving again.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the best way to do this would probably be to tell a story. And this is one of my favorite stories because it was such a good result. But we had worked with a client called Schneider National. They're a 3PL, so a third-party logistics provider. They have big orange trucks or orange and white trucks. So they compete with, like Ryder and Penske and things like that. So they were pushing out generic messaging, just like their competitors, around better people, better process, better technology. That's something that's very similar in SaaS. I'm sure people have heard that a lot.
Yep.
And they were targeting Sigma, which is a division of Cisco, so the food company. And that particular organization had been targeted by Schneider for about over 5 years. They were targeting from sales and from marketing and being, super unresponsive because they had heard that typical story about that better people process technology thing from everyone. So it didn't resonate with them, and they didn't see their personal gaps. They didn't see their personal impacts. They didn't see themselves in that story. So, when they tried to get in touch with them, they had exhausted everything between sales, marketing. They had touched social, email, live, phone conversations, and it just wasn't getting anywhere. And the messaging that they were sending out, the content they were sharing also had no commercial impact on the buyer, which commercial insights and impact is part of the challenger sale as well. And we took a deeper dive and we looked at Schneider's connections. So for example, we were working with the VP of sales at Schneider, and she happened to be connected to the VP of logistics at Sigma, which would be their key decision maker. But we noticed that they weren't having that right conversation. They weren't sharing the right content, sending the right messaging to make that human connection. So that's why it kind of went from a LinkedIn connection to nothing more. So what we did is we redesigned the profiles. We redesigned some articles and content to show how mid-market firms like Sigma were being underserved by the offering that Schneider was selling, which happened to be a TMS or a transportation management system.
Okay.
So Schneider, what they needed to do is show Sigma and other target accounts that were similar to them that they're basically the middle child of the service provider, not big enough to handle and run with the big guns, but not small enough to handle by the really boutique kind of logistics companies. Yep. So what they needed was the Sigma and the buying committee to acknowledge the gaps that they had in their processes and in their tool, and then the impacts that were being, put on operations across the entire supply chain, and then also impacts to their P&L, impacts to their employees, their customers, service, KPIs, and you created that bigger buying vision. And ultimately, Schneider basically created buyer-centric profiles and content and messaging that was speaking at the human versus to them.
Yep.
Or speaking to them versus at them. That's what I meant. With the key accounts they wanted to protect, expand, or win. And, they increased their relevance and they started to pull business development through their sales cycle. And they were able to create a 6-month sales cycle when they're typically used to a 12 or 18-month sales cycle.
Huge win.
Yeah. And on top of that, Sigma became an account that could be worth anywhere from $2 to $6 million, depending on how long they were able to retain them as a client. So that was something that cutting down sales cycles is one awesome win. But if we can even extend the customer lifetime value on top of a close, it's like icing on the cake.
Yeah. I think a lot of us, we really get focused on net new logos, bringing them in, but, retaining customers, expanding customers, huge way to grow your business that I think, the really smart businesses are focusing on, and some businesses just haven't got to it or figured it out yet. So can you use the same strategy with LinkedIn and ABM for maybe existing accounts that are at risk or expanding, current business?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done that as well. And that goes back to changing that conversation. So, you have to make sure, like, say, an account is coming up for renewal, or you just kind of heard through your connections that they're looking around, they're going to other companies to see what they could get. You kind of have to change the conversation to, we achieved X, Y, and Z for you, and then or we did X, Y, and Z, and we got ABC results. Like, that's great, and that's what maybe the person that's using the solution or using the technology or whatever it is you're offering is using. They care about that. But the person that's going to sign off on the deal, the person that's actually going to approve the expansion, is going to want to know how that solution or offering, whatever it is, how it affected the organization or the department and group that needed it and used it, but how it expanded outwards. Like, so how did it influence operations? How did it influence my customers? How did it influence my bottom line revenue? As much as you can get, that way it kind of shows that if we leave, that's how much, these are the things that are going to be impacted. And if you can also, better yet, talk to the gaps that you know that are in your competitor solutions, and this is what will happen if you choose the competitor, you can change the conversation, because you're pretty much showing them what's going to happen if they go that route. And you give them something to think about, that, okay, well, we already know what we're doing here with you, but are we willing to take the risk of switching to your competitor when you've brought this to our attention? So I think those are totally different conversations. So you can't use the same selling conversation that you would have with net new as you would with existing.
Awesome. Kristina, it's been great. Thanks for sharing all of your knowledge with us. If people want to get in contact with you and continue the conversation, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Reach out on LinkedIn, Kristina Jaramillo. Just make sure you give me a relevant or some insight into why I should connect with you, because I'm super picky and I purge my connections all the time. So give me a reason and then I'll connect. Or you can email me at Kristina@personalabm.com. Check out our website at personalabm.com. Also check out our content community, or Stop the Sales Drop, which has videos, podcast archives, articles about stopping the sales drop. It's for the people that we've been talking about. The audience is sales, marketing, anyone who's revenue focused. And that's a great tool as well.
Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Kristina. And we'll chat later.
Thanks so much, Billy.